Version 15's been announced. There's a new bevel tool. Finally. Took a while, took a lot of effort and a lot of kicking and screaming, but there is a new bevel tool in cinema. Let's have a look at this bad boy. There's always been a bevel tool in cinema. I'm sure it's always done bevels, but you know what? Hasn't been the most reliable workhorse. Cinema 4D version 15's new bevel tool. Let's right click, grab the bevel tool. Let's show you what we've got. Click and drag. Oh, look, a bevel. Now, cinema's always been able to do this. However, though, let's just throw in a few subdivisions. It's now nicer. You can now tweak the bevel once you've made it. It shows you the edge it originally came from. And if I start grabbing some other different edges around here, if I maybe grab a loop around here, or at least get a few of these bits. Clicky, 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 clicky. I can click and drag out a new bevel, and it works. Look at that. It goes round. It makes the right shape. Yeah, there's only so much you can really say about a bevel tool, but it now works. Different types, different shapes. There is a solid bevel tool, which if you've ever used solid chamfer before, that's somewhat similar. It's designed so that you can use the what used to be the hypernerbs, but now the subdivision surfaces. So you can use it with those instead. Choose your subdivisions, choose your shape, choose your profile, add in a spline if you like to choose your own shape. But yeah, other than that, there's a few choices for what it should do on corners, how it should round things off. But it works. It works. It's reliable. You can tweak the edges. Don't click there. Made it go a little bit too far. But yeah, it works. It's a working bevel tool. There's only so much you can say. And there's more things I want to mention. Now, this video is not going to be a list of everything in version 15. It's going to be the things I'm interested in. Those of you looking for team render, there is another video with that just in it by itself. If you really want to see that, go have a look at it now. Come back later. Or just wait till the end of this one. But let's go through the features we've got. Now, I will keep looking to the side. I have my list. My memory isn't amazing. So there's a bevel tool. We've also got text kerning. That's one of the nice new things. If I grab a bit of text. Okay, look at that horrible kerning. The E doesn't really sit underneath the T. It could have gone into the space of the X a little bit. Doesn't look amazing. But version 15 now has kerning. If I grab my text object, I have a kerning option down here. I can either unfold it, numerical settings if you like those, or hit the Show 3D GUI button. And we now have an interface. So I can drag my letters around, tweak it, pop them over there, pick the spacing I like, but it remains nice and editable as a spline object. So I can still change my fonts and do all the other things we like to do. There's kerning, there's spacing, tracking settings in there. Choose the baseline heights. You can really go quite mad with the text. Adjusting and resizing individual bits, if that's what floats your boat. Resizing it, rescaling it. What does that one there do? Just scales the whole thing down, but keeps the spacing between them. So yeah, there is now kerning on the text object, so you don't have to make it editable, or you don't have to go into Illustrator just to do some text now. But if you prefer, there are kerning settings down there if you want to start typing them in instead. I've already used this on a few projects quite nicely. Just one thing. Loading, if you make a project in 15 and try and give it to someone else with an older version, the kerning stays there. If they try and edit the text, it will suddenly go away, but if you give your project to someone else with an older version, the kerning will actually stay on the project. It's quite nice, quite clever. Let's see what else we got on our list. Okay, deformers. Yes, a few changes here. Number one, they are now multi-threaded. So if you've ever had a bit of a slow time bending and twisting and exploding things, most of the deformers are now multi-threaded. I don't have an exact list of everyone that has been updated, but just a few little quick tests I did earlier. I took a 3 million polygon surface, and before I had about 4 frames per second, and in version 15 that's doubled up to just under 10 frames per second. So there's a good speed boost with most of these deformers. Not really a new feature, but a nice welcome change. However, though, there is a more important change which has gone on with these deformers. If I grab a cube, let's go for something exciting. Throw in a few divisions so we can actually deform and twist it. With these deformers, number one, if you hold down Shift, and this has actually always been the case, if you hold down Shift when adding a deformer, it gets added as a child to the object, which is where it needs to go. The difference now is, if my object is over here, and it's rotated to some direction or another, when you add your deformer, hold down Shift, it automatically fits it and orientates it. Yes, it's a nice change. It'll save you a fair bit of time. I can now just jump in there and start deforming my cube immediately without having to position it, get it in the right place, get it to the right size, get it to the right orientation. It's now all done for you. And in fact, if you don't do the shift thing, maybe you're shifting deformers around, maybe you're loading an old project, deformers now have a nice little button sat at the bottom, happily called Fit to Parent, which basically runs that same little bit of code which arranges the deformer. Just one thing, some deformers you will want to rotate them 90 degrees or so. If I rotate this deformer, let's see, spin it round. If I spin it round here to that sort of angle, when I hit my Fit to Parent button, it will snap it and intelligently work out which 90 degrees it's closest to. So it's not just going to simply sit upright every time. If you've rotated it around mostly 90 degrees to the side, it is actually smart enough to get the right orientation and the right direction. So well done, Maxon, on that one. Let's see. Okay, hair and grass. Hair works better with the physical render engine. If you've ever tried making a bit of grass, for example, in your architectural scenes using the physical render engine, using the hair system is now more reliable. It works nicer, it works faster, looks better. And this was done for a reason. Version 15, and this is in the Studio and the Visualize version, I believe. You now have, oops, wrong icon, grass. Let's just find an object we can actually add this to. If you have a look underneath your scene objects, floors, skies, backgrounds, that sort of thing, there is now a grow grass command, which it is based on the hair system. Let's not lie, it is based on the hair system. But it's just a nice simplified version of it, rather than having to work out all the render settings, all of the material settings, all of the object settings, set them to green, get the width right, and all the rest of it. It's basically all done for you. It's more of a workflow enhancement than anything. So if I have a surface, and wrong icon again, don't know why I keep going in there. If I grow some grass on here, there we go. You've got your grass material and a little tag over there. Not really any settings on there you can change. Think of it like a material tag, I guess. But if you hit render, whoomp, there's your grass. That's it. You've got your grass material. Nice and simple, straightforward. Choose your color of your grass from root to tip. If you want to do a football field with some white lines on it, or you want to put some advertisers' sponsored logos into your grass for your rugby, soccer, Formula 1 race grass, you can throw an image in there and it'll quite happily cover that image over your surface. So at the minute we just have this plain green grass. Okay. But if I grab a texture, let's see, what have I got laying around? Okay, I seem to have a picture of Tower Bridge. That will do. Hit render. Boom. And there is now a picture of London's Tower Bridge growing here. Now, you may think, oh, hold on, this is a little bit sparse. But first of all, do consider you will probably be using this for larger areas of grass. So you're likely going to have a little bit of distance, and your surface is likely going to be larger. Now, just one nice thing I do like about this is the grass maintains its size. So if my blades of grass look this big on this plane, when I scale my plane up, I don't just get giant blades of grass, I simply get more of it. It'll take a little bit longer whilst it renders as more of a surface area, but I'll now get those blades of grass simply covering the larger area. So the grass maintains its size. It's actually set down in your materials down here. So you specify the length, specify the size, and then that is used for your grass surface. But you can see Tower Bridge showing up a little bit better there if I turn my head slightly. But still, maybe you do want a little bit more density on the grass. Maybe you're going to have a low down shot quite close to the grass. I'll tell you what, I'll just lose the image. And you're thinking, hey, this is, it's a little bit sparse down there. Got a density slider. Just boost it up. I believe it will go above 100, so you don't just drag it from 0 to 100, you can push it high if you want. But if I boost it from the default of 15% density, and I crank that up to about 50%, there's a good, nice amount of grass. That'd be perfectly fine now, I think. But you can choose how crinkly it is, how bendy the grass is, and how wet, how moist the grass surface is going to be. It's a nice, simple little addition. Because, let's be honest, a lot of people did just use the hair system for making grass. So they've streamlined that somewhat. Okay, let's take a look at some of the other stuff. Let's have a look at some of the render changes. First of all, for people using the different versions of Cinema, global illumination is now part of all versions of Cinema. Those of you on C4D Prime, congratulations, you now have global illumination. And there are some changes in it. Let's have a look at some of the changes. First of all, just one little tiny thing. For those of you who were using the physical render engine, you may notice there's a slight absentee from the bottom of the list. The physical render engine used to have a indirect illumination option in it. It was just basically QMC global illumination. It's gone, it's been removed. If you had that enabled, you'll be using QMC mode now instead. So if you're looking for it, stop looking, it's gone. Just enable global illumination and set it to QMC mode, quasi Monte Carlo. That is the indirect illumination mode you used to have. Okay, so just to clear that one up for anyone who thinks it's gone missing. But now onto the global illumination itself. A few changes here. First of all, we now have primary and secondary methods. You may have remembered from version 14, let me just quickly fire up the older version, or maybe your current version, depends when you're viewing this. You used to have GI. You used to have this single drop-down mode, which said IR, that was the irradiance, QMC, and then you used to have these IR plus QMC modes. These were basically what happens when the ray of light bounces for the first time. It would use that mode, and then all subsequent bounces would use the other method. Now, to give you more control, more flexibility, and frankly, because the list is starting to get longer, this has been scrapped. Goodbye. You now just have which mode you want for the primary bounce, the first hit, and then what mode would you like for the secondary bounce. So you can mix and match your QMC, your irradiance cache. Oh, by the way, there is a new version of it. It's faster, it's cleaner, it just works better. If you load in your old projects, they may have the irradiance cache legacy mode enabled. I would advise you to bump it up to the new version. But in the secondary methods, we now have a new option called light mapping. I'm not going to dive into all the details here. This really sort of warrants its own video. But basically, light mapping, it's great for interiors. It gives you good quality, smooth illumination, no flickering. It can be cached, and it renders pretty quickly. So, light mapping, it's a nice new method. Give that one a go. Give it a whirl. You might prefer this one compared to some of the others because the QMC mode can get grainy. The irradiance cache mode can get slow, and if you're doing an animation, it can get a bit flickery. So you're going to probably prefer the light mapping mode. Let's see. Oh, so that's the GI. Yeah, that's sorted. Let's go over to the physical settings though. we've got a couple of new bits. You may possibly, if you've been keeping up on your news, you may possibly have heard of something called Embry. Intel has basically made a series of libraries, sort of chunks of pre-made code, if you like, which will speed up rendering. If you go to the Advanced tab when using the physical render engine, you will now see there are 3 ray tracing engines. If you'd like to use the old one for any reason, there's not really much reason you would use it, to be honest. It's there, it's simply called physical. But if you want the new ones, we have these 2 here called Embry. One called faster, one called smaller. This is just a question of render speed versus memory. The faster method, that is the default now, it's faster, but it does use quite a bit of memory. This is probably not going to be much of an issue because frankly these days you're going to have 8 gigs, 16, 32, you're going to have plenty of memory. So they default to the fast method, which is a little bit less efficient with your RAM usage. But if you do find yourself running out of memory, if you do have issues, try the smaller method. It's the same thing, looks the same, but it uses less memory, but it's not quite as quick. And there is also something else here called Quick Preview. As one of the side benefits of these, there is now something called the Quick Preview mode. Let's show you this. Let's see, do I have a scene which is going to be slow enough? Okay, let's grab this studio shot. If I set my scene here to the Quick Preview mode, let's go to the physical engine. And that's all fine, that's all good. Now, you'll notice it says progressive mode. The idea of this Quick Preview is that it gives you a low quality image very, very fast. So it gives you a quick idea about what your scene's going to look like before you really start rendering. So if I set my render engine to the progressive mode, rather than having to wait a little while just to get the first pass, this new Quick Preview mode, shove that over there, hit render. Actually, I might change my global illumination to QMC because that tends to work best with the physical mode. If I hit render here, it will think about it and then bang, it just bursts out this really fast preview version of it. And from there on, it then starts doing your proper renders. So it's good for quick tests. You can enable it for other modes. Oops, wrong one. You can enable it for all modes, so it always does this quick preview image, so you get a quick rough idea if your scene's going to look okay. But it does add a small, tiny chunk onto your render times. So it's good for progressive mode because that's sort of your quick test render version. But you can turn it on for all the different modes as well. But in a nutshell, it helps with quickly getting a rough idea about what your scene's going to look like. Let's see what else we got on our list here. Oh, ambient occlusion. That can be faster now. Ambient occlusion. Let's grab a cube, make it white, and duplicate a few of these around. Ambient occlusion now has caching. That wasn't something you could actually do previously, but if you now enable ambient occlusion, you'll find there is a cache tab. You can enable caching for your ambient occlusion. So for your big renders, your animations, rather than recalculating it all again and again and again for each frame, ambient occlusion can now be cached. So you render it once, it thinks about it, it caches it. Okay, but for your subsequent renders, and this may only work in the picture viewer, yep, it will render it faster. Now, there is a tiny downside. Sometimes you can get a little inaccuracy, maybe a little splotch here and there, but for the most part, works pretty well. I would just leave it turned on most of the time myself. What else we got? Okay, right, we're on to some smaller things now. Mac users with deep pockets. Cinema now supports the Retina screen. Not everything is in the high definition Retina stuff, but if I load up the old version again, version 14, and I pop 15 above it, let's go take a quick look. Zoom, 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 zoom. You'll now see the new icons. If you have a high resolution Retina screen, they look nicer in the new version than they do in the old version. There's your HyperNurbs, there's the old one, there's your render icon, there's the old one. So just a nice little change. You've now got Retina support. There are a few things which don't support it, one of which being the 3D view. It does slow down quite a lot if you use the higher resolution, so at least for the time being, they're maxing are sticking to the same resolution they had before. But your icons look nicer. There's no more NURBS. Well, slight lie, they've just renamed them. Your extrude NURBS is now just extrude. Your lathe NURBS is now just lathe. And your HyperNurbs, I'm afraid HyperNurbs are no more. It's now subdivision surface. Same thing, different label. As I mentioned, there's the team render. That's a really big feature. Go have a look at that if you like. I've got another video for that one. Oh, there's a new window called the Texture Manager. If I open up a project, quite a big project, quite a lot of textures. Okay, it's missing a file. Let me just actually check I've opened the right version. I probably haven't. Let me open, let's see, desktop, texture, projects. Okay, here's a shot of London done for another job a while ago. But the important thing is it has lots of textures. And if you've ever worked on a big project with lots of files, you've moved them around, made backups, made copies, made archives, moved it from one computer to another, lots of different versions, you might start to lose track of your textures. Version 15 has a new texture manager. The texture manager will give you a bit of information about which textures are missing, which ones work. And if you fancy, you can right-click on these textures. Sorry, no, not right-click. But you can essentially... Where are we gone? Well, you've got a few tools. You can select the things that are missing. You can select the ones that are just not there. You can localize and globalize file names. So rather than having this great big path, users, mash, desktop, blah, 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 you can pop them back and forth between using their full paths and their short paths. It's just a nice, good overview, tells you which files are missing, tells you what you've screwed up, and allows you to do sort of find and replace to relink textures in there. So those of you who have had a bit of a nightmare with your projects before, use this. It will save you some stress. Okay, a couple of little tiny bits left. The Align Normals tool, if you've ever used it, it's more reliable now. I'm not going to waste your time with that. Oh, Sculpting. Those of you who like your sculpting tools, let's just grab a plane here and flick over to the sculpting layout. Sculpting tools now work on polygon objects. It used to be that you had to give your objects the special sculpting tag and use your subdivide setting to sculpt anything. But if you want, you can now use all of these sculpting tools as simple polygon manipulation tools. So you can inflate things and drag things and slice them with knives. Now, it will only make sense on relatively dense meshes. So just on this flat plane, for example, it's not really going to do a great deal. But all of these tools will now quite happily work. Get big brush. Will now quite happily work on simple polygon surfaces without you having to officially enable the sculpting system. So technically, I guess you've got a whole bunch of new polygon tools. Quite nice. That's it. Those are the bits I care about. There are some improvements to the character animation system, but that's not really my area, if I'm honest. Go have a look at the Grayscale Gorilla videos. Go have a look at 3D Kiwi's C4D Cafe videos. Maybe Tim Clapham might do something from Hello Lux. Maybe they'll show you those. But the only last little tiny thing to mention, there is no more 32-bit version. Those of you who have been clinging on to your old computer and are using a 32-bit version of Windows XP, game over, man, game over. It's time for you to upgrade. Cinema is now 64-bit only. The umbilical cord has been cut. So if you do have an old machine and you don't have the funds to get a little bit of an upgrade, don't waste your time with the new version of Cinema. It's now 64-bit only. But that's it. Those are my big bits. Actually, sorry, there is one more tiny bit, just remembered. There is now a camera crane. With the last version, Cinema started expanding its motion camera system and its morph camera system to help you get the shots you want. There is one more new object called the camera crane. Let's just nip back to the standard layout. If you grab a camera crane, it's quite straightforward. I will point out, this is not anything you couldn't have already done yourself. The camera crane, let's move me out the way. The camera crane allows you to get more realistic natural motions. And with that, I mean, it's going to limit the movement you can do so that you don't get silly spinning cameras doing all sorts. You will literally get a camera crane. You can, let's see, choose the height of your crane, choose how long the arm is, change the pitch of the entire arm. Let's see, spin around the heading of the camera on its sort of gimbal end. So it allows you to get sort of more realistic shots you'd actually get on a film shoot. Now, this isn't anything you couldn't have done yourself. You could have taken a camera, put it inside a series of nulls, keyframed them. It was always possible. But this is a nice little system. Just helps you get those shots a little bit more quicker. But that'll do. That's the new stuff you got in version 15. There are some other things I've left off. Go watch someone else's videos. I haven't kept track of everything that's new in the new version. But for now, for today, I think that will do.